Story 1. A world where not everything was filmed and put online for consumption and prosperity. Story 2. Saturday morning cartoons. It was a kind of magical children-only time slot where everything was geared toward kids. Cartoons, commercials, even advertisement bumps. It's gone. Story 3. A world without social media and always online attitudes. The irony is I am a lifelong computer geek and programmer. My partner says I am the worst techie she has ever met because, outside of computers, I have no interest in technology or the web. Reddit is the one exception because, for all its faults, it is the last major site that still reminds me somewhat of the chaos and fun of the early web. We built ourselves a hell of a Skinner box. Story 4. We went to the pub and shot the breeze for hours, with no phones or other outside distractions. The little pub on my university campus did not even have a television, so there was no sports bar vibe. People went, got pints and talked. Story 5. Life before the internet was different. Simple things seemed much more fascinating, and people were more authentic. Story 6. Watching television, movies, and computer games without spoilers was better. We did not know what would happen, and we did not have months of cast lists and story ideas. Events unfolded naturally, and it felt much better. Story 7. Here's a list in no particular order. No social media. No constant connection through the tether to a smartphone. No constant bombardment of sports betting advertisements. Video rental stores and video game rentals. Being able to go to a concert and watch it without thousands of phones in the way. Meeting people in person the old-fashioned way without a shopping catalog of targets for online dating apps. Being able to go in public and call someone a dickhead when they are acting like one without having your video shared on social media and that person and their friends trying to get you fired. $5 footlongs. $1 menu. Normal political conversation and discourse without constant extremism everywhere. Hacky sack. Newspapers. Bathroom reading material. Pizzeroni. Chicken soup in a bread bowl and genuinely good baked goods at Tim Hortons. Discovery Channel, History Channel, and the Learning Channel all having interesting things on television. Reality television being rare and unpopular. Story 8. The good kind of ignorance. By that I mean not being exposed to the constant 24-hour news cycle. The news used to be something you watched at the end of the day or read at your own discretion. People talked about it, but not with such frequency or exaggerated emotion. Now I am bombarded with information about wars, terrorism, disease, natural disasters, crime, acts of cruelty, sexual offenses, impending climate catastrophe, and the breakdown of society. If anyone says, just don't read the news, it is actually impossible to fully escape that cycle unless you live completely off-grid, cut off from the internet, all media, and other people. Hearing this constant stream of terrible news is damaging to your mental health, and sometimes I think ignorance can really be bliss. Story 9. Others have said being inaccessible and being bored, so I will say adventuring without a plan. I know it's become a bit of a meme or vignette, but as a 36-year-old, I am probably in the last generation who got on our bikes after breakfast and came back at sundown. We would bomb around in the forest, have sword fights with tree branches, jump around in rivers, walk the train tracks, spend the $5 we bummed from our parents to buy a soda or sandwich, and figure it out as we went. Story 10. Life before screens, social media, artificial intelligence, and people recording everything. Story 11. Critical thinking and wonder. There wasn't an answer to every question in the palm of your hand. Story 12. Before cell phones, people learned to be present in the moment, to deal with boredom, and to be social. Phones have seriously damaged people's mental health and social abilities far more than most realize. For example, when you watch videos of high school students from around 2001, they often seem more mature. Story 13. The uniqueness of new experiences. When I was 17, I drove 2 hours with friends to a concert in another city. We had no global positioning system or phones in the car and no idea what the city or the venue looked like, what the stage setup would be like, or what songs would be played. That lack of knowing made me feel a sense of wonder about trying new things. Story 14. I just turned 36. I grew up before the internet was in the palm of your hand. I miss having a Nokia brick cell phone that could make calls and send a limited number of text messages, and needing to either pick up the phone or sit at my computer to chat with friends on AOL Instant Messenger. We were connected, but not constantly. It was the perfect balance. Story 15. Slamming the phone down to end a call when someone has upset you. Story 16. The assumption that I will be able to receive the Social Security benefits I have been paying into. Story 17. I wish we could go back to the time before the internet and cell phones. Story 18. Everything felt possible and safe. I wasn't afraid of being shot all the time. I expected to own a house on a middle-class income. I could dig around for some change and have enough for gas and maybe food to hang out with my friends for a whole day. As others have said, the main thing is probably not being available all the time. Story 19. Being able to buy your first house is becoming increasingly difficult. Unfortunately, Wall Street is now using housing as an investment asset, so most young people will be renters for life. Story 20. There is near universal agreement in this thread that the combination of smartphones and social media was a huge mistake. Story 21. I used to be able to sit and watch television. Now I watch television while scrolling and doing other things, and I cannot focus on a single task or sit and read without my mind wandering. Story 22. I prefer services that do not require accounts, signups, or paid subscriptions to access content. I prefer less surveillance. Social media, while it has made me more aware of politics, is also exhausting and depressing. On a more personal note, I liked video game walkthroughs and strategy documents that were plain text files with some American Standard Code for information interchange art at the top that I could search through, or printed game guides. I do not like interactive maps or video walkthroughs. Story 23. When you could buy physical copies of movies, music, and video games, you had collections. Now subscriptions are everywhere. Story 24. Every single thing is being recorded, so you cannot have a moment of stupidity without the chance of it being posted to the internet. Story 25. Rushing back from the kitchen with snacks before the end of the commercial break. Story 26. The lack of insanity in politics meant that, regardless of who was in office, most people went about their day. It was nice. Story 27. I don't know how common this was, but when I was in middle school and early high school in the late 1990s, the movie theater on weekends was the place to go for teens. Parents would drop us off and we would mix with students from 2 or 3 other high schools and hang out. The crowds were huge. Another gathering spot was football games. They were just as big and crowded, and it was fun to go to away games. It was a way to meet girls and make friends. For me, it was very normal, and there was always anticipation to go to the movies, the mall, football games, or county fairs. Fast forward to now. I cannot remember the last time I saw a crowd of teenagers that large, on their own, huddled in groups, laughing, being kids, smiling, spending time together, and getting into shenanigans. I see most teens supervised in one way or another and not gathered in such large groups. I cannot comment on the overall good or bad of this change. I am sure there are positives and negatives, but growing up like that was great. I liked it a lot and would recommend that experience to anyone at that age. Story 28. Real arcades with actual games, not the current play-to-win style. Story 29. Going a whole day without somebody trying to sell me something. Story 30. These are the cheap video home system tapes of public domain cartoons your grandmother buys at the pharmacy so you can watch something on her videocassette recorder when you visit. Story 31. Buying products that work out of the box and never break. Story 32. Having a hobby simply for the joy of it. We don't need to monetize everything we do. Story 33. I really miss the simplicity of life before smartphones. Just hanging out with friends without distractions was so much more meaningful. Story 34. Going through your awkward phase as a teenager without having 10 phone cameras immortalize every moment on the internet. Computers were a gateway to an exciting new world that you entered when you turned them on and left when you turned them off. Now they are mundane and omnipresent. Life was much more ad hoc. Technology was viewed with optimism, hence the year 2000 aesthetic, instead of with disappointment and annoyance. Story 35. Buying and owning a product rather than everything being a subscription. Story 36, life before the internet became a polarizing, attention-stealing machine. Story 37, there was less fear of being incorrect because we were not on a global stage. The Internet of America online days was a lot less corporate and heavy with advertisements. Story 38, just visiting someone's house or having them over. Sebastian Maniscalco has a good bit about it. It used to be a treat to have people over or to go to their homes. My parents even moved so they could be somewhat close to friends, and it happened several times a week. It wasn't always a party. Most of the time it was mundane. They always had guest snacks that were nicer than usual. Apart from that, it was nice to randomly have people to hang out and chat with. Occasionally it happened at inconvenient times, but it wasn't super tedious. Not like today when people would call it a stressor. Story 39. Silence. People are so addicted to their phones, even my elderly parents, that you are always surrounded by noise and movement. Just sitting quietly is almost unheard of. Story 40. Being able to afford to live is becoming harder. Every time I make strides toward improvement and success, the goalposts move farther away. It feels like walking down a hallway, getting close to the end, and then the end moves farther back, so I have to keep walking. The effort is no longer worth the reward. I feel sorry for Generation Z and Generation Alpha. Story 41. A world in which going to the cinema to see a major new film was a cultural event and felt like Christmas. Story 42. Manners, general civility, and consideration are declining. Today, it is everyone for themselves, at least in the United States. Either people do not know how to be kind or they do not care about the comfort of the people around them, which is selfish. For example, taking someone else's seat on an airplane, letting your children run wild and damage property, playing loud music where you do not know the people around you, and using outside voices indoors. There are fewer reputable sources of truth that are not social media. Rest in peace, encyclopedias and dictionaries. Story 43. This expectation of playdates, where kids can hang out only if they are scheduled, is really weird to me. Whatever happened to just going over to a friend's house, grabbing something out of their fridge, and running upstairs to see if they are home? We owned the neighborhood back then. We'd sword fight in the streets, have water fights, and play video games whenever we wanted. We didn't have to set a time on the calendar. I hear that's over by and large. Story 44. Very soon, we may face a world without any artificial intelligence-generated content. This is becoming a problem quickly. Story 45. Being able to play outside throughout the neighborhood and just run around as a pack of children on bikes in the suburbs. Now, if a child is outside without an adult in view, Child Protective Services or the police are called, even if the child is old enough to play unsupervised. Story 46. Shared musical experiences. Thanks to siloing and the algorithmic control of playlists, music no longer has the power to shape a generation. Much of what rises to the top is as disposable as a Happy Meal toy and will have about as much cultural impact. Top artists chase the next hit single, so they trend for a few days. Albums are no longer musical journeys, and whatever tops one list might never reach your ears because you have to go out of your way to find something different. It makes me sad that young people will not have that. They will not know the power of a song that can reach across boundaries and bring people together because they probably will never hear it. Story 47. When technology was new and exciting instead of one privacy violation after another. Story 48. Having to go on a first date without knowing much about the other person. Story 49. When you had to actually have a conversation at dinner with friends, rather than everyone on their phones. Story 50. Reading a notepad filled with hidden information about your favorite video game is the kind of thing people bought Nintendo Power magazines for. Story 51. Halloween saddens me because most children today do not experience it the same way I did. Story 52. I miss not having to subscribe to everything and the days when purchases were not recurring transactions. Story 53. Those poster-sized printed game maps you got in Nintendo Power magazine. Story 54. You could do something stupid and it might not ruin your entire life because someone filmed it and it became a viral video. Story 55. Politics used to be boring to the masses. Nowadays, everyone asserts stupidity with nothing but vibes. Foundations built on falsehoods, then blaming others when you are covered in filth. Story 56. The time period when the internet was not curated to push advertisements and inflammatory content into your face 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Story 57. Student sections at university football games used to be free for students, and we could go on a day off with no planning. Now everything is a lottery, and tickets are expensive and difficult to obtain. Story 58. You could drive half an hour into the mountains, pop your hatchback, and car camp in the wilderness. Nobody cared, and it was not jam-packed with people intent on destroying, defiling, or burning things down. Story 59. The Sunday comics section of the paper. Trick-or-treating with the entire neighborhood. Seeing Led Zeppelin live for $13. Story 60. I no longer had to answer the phone or return calls, could say the letter got lost in the post, and was generally uncontactable until I chose to be reachable. I regret the loss of my privacy. Story 61. A disconnected world. If you were on the phone, you knew exactly where that person was. Now do not get me wrong. I like access to information in the modern world, but it has become something unhelpful. Story 62. Actually, hanging out with people at the mall, or for us at Meyer because it was open 24 hours, made our social lives much richer. We had to plan and prepare, and once our parents dropped us off, we were legitimately out in the world with our friends. Story 63. The internet was about fun and information, not a fucking shopping mall. Story 64. People do the right thing in a bad situation by stepping in to protect someone instead of just recording. Story 65. No internet. It was so different. Teens today won't experience it. You socialized much more because you couldn't hide behind a screen. Even the smallest trip felt like an adventure because you had no pictures, just an address and often some stories. I only knew one picture of the Eiffel Tower, and that's it. I had no idea how big it is in real life. Now you can watch hundreds of thousands of videos from 1,000 different angles. The magic is gone. You made your own relationship standards. Today there are so many rules and expectations. Back then we just explored ourselves. Everything you did was for yourself or your friends, not for the cloud. 90% of your friends lived in your area, so you had a lot of different characters to interact with. This heterogeneous group trained your social skills. I could go on forever. Story 66. The lack of devices and technology means people don't have conversations anymore. Story 67. Life was based in reality rather than on the internet and screens. People were more present and had not been consuming rage bait all day. Felt different. Story 68. Laughing out loud. There are so many comments about people who do not know how to unplug. It is as if their life depends on it. Just turn off your damn phone. Story 69. The speed of computer technology has accelerated. In 1990, we were still getting games for the Nintendo Entertainment System. In 1999, the Sega Dreamcast was released. The current perpetual state of gaming, where a child might play Fortnite for 10 straight years, was unheard of back then. After 6 months, a game would look obsolete compared to a mind-blowing new title. Entire genres were invented. Nothing as revolutionary as Doom or Final Fantasy VII is being released today. Story 70. I remember sitting in a dentist's office chair with nothing to do, staring at the ceiling or at a strange fish tank with a single fish. Multi-hour road trips with no screen and no headphones, only a window and passing scenery. When I was at my grandparents' house and the neighbor my age was not home, I was not allowed to watch television and there was no computer. I learned to shuffle cards while sitting there, bored out of my mind. These days, people, even those our age, cannot tolerate being idle for even a few seconds before taking out their phones. Story 71. I remember and miss a world with less political division where fringe voices do not hijack every discussion. I have since accepted that it will not return. Story 72. Growing up before smartphones, and without the internet in general, the days felt much longer. After school I could play basketball, explore the woods, play video games, or watch a movie. It seemed like there was endless time. On vacations abroad, when I did not update my phone plan, I experienced living without the internet. It was liberating. I did not check social media or have other distractions without internet access. I have wanted to try living internet-free as an experiment but have not been able to. I think it would help me and many others feel less stressed and be more productive. Story 73. I am doing this just to have fun. Nowadays, many young people, it seems to me, do things because of the fear of missing out. Story 74. Everything before September 11th, 2001. I am not sure if I am experiencing that feeling of nostalgia that returns after 30 years, but society was different then in ways that are easy to miss unless you pause to think. To me, that period was turbulent and it changed everything, mostly for the worse. Story 75. Life without cell phones, relying on paper maps to drive around. Story 76. Complacency. In the 1990s, alternative culture was all about not selling out, breaking the mold, and resisting conformity. When society is a relatively safe place economically, environmentally, socially, and otherwise, you can take those kinds of risks. I remember getting the constant message, don't take a corporate job and have a normal life. Do something exciting and radical. Underlying that was the idea that if it doesn't work out, things will be okay and you can take the safe route, get a normal job, and be fine. Now, with massive existential threats and the possibility that even if you work hard and go to college there may be no job waiting for you, the standard corporate conformist route looks goddamn good. I worry about this for my kids every day. They're bright, smart, and hardworking, but I worry like hell that no matter how well they do, their odds of even a standard life, a good job, decent pay, enough to support a family, are very, very slim. Maybe I'm partly just getting old, but complacency now seems like a dream, and I long for it just as much as I spurned it decades ago. Story 77. Right now, there is a sense of well-being and optimism about the future. Story 78. Backyards used to be full of the sounds of birds and insects, not just an occasional chirp, but continuous chirping and buzzing. There are about 90% fewer birds and insects now than 30 years ago. Story 79. The video store was a place where it wasn't weird to run into a stranger, strike up a conversation, and end up sharing your favorite show and movie recommendations with each other. Story 80. The assumption that other people also respect individual liberty and will not attempt to use the state to coerce or control others. Story 81. News organizations that once engaged in investigative journalism and unbiased reporting began to decline when paper subscriptions crumbled, forcing more news outlets to rely on advertisers for income. Now they have largely been acquired by billionaires. Story 82. A life where normal things were not seen as luxuries, like backpacking, good customer service, and good food. People were not afraid to give compliments to one another. Story 83. I feel like I grew up in a golden age for learning. I am sure that may not be true by the numbers, but still. My children attend the same middle school I attended, and I do not think I could learn by computer every day. I had to write notes, which helped retention. I had to read books for references, and it was easier then to find relevant, reliable information. Story 84. I am not over 35, but I missed life before smartphones, short-form media designed to capture attention for advertisers, and the addictive design of the internet in general. If it were possible, I would uninvent the smartphone. Story 85. Most people were not constantly available. You had to leave a message on their answering machine or with someone at their house, or arrange in advance where they would be. A few people, such as doctors and first responders, might have had pagers, but those only told them to call you back. We did not have social media, cell phones, text messages, email, and so on. If you made plans, you had to show up. You could not call and cancel at the last minute. You had to meet at the predetermined place. Story 86. Music television in the early 1980s exposed me to a wide range of music. I watched for hours each day, never knowing whether metal, pop, British new wave, or jazz would play next. Today we can search online for any sound, but the blended playlists I waded through to hear a favorite band introduced me to many styles I might otherwise have ignored. Story 87. It was a night out where there might be a Polaroid photo, but people were not glued to their phones or filming. Everyone was just chatting and having fun. Story 88. The younger generation will never know the excitement we had. The modern world has eliminated the element of surprise. You cannot discover things if influencers have already shown them to you. That did not and could not exist back then. Story 89. Things like real food, fresh air, nature, and real cinema. Story 90. Growing up and living without constant concern about gun violence in schools and in public was common. It wasn't a normal thing in the 1990s and early 2000s before Columbine. Even then, it was an isolated, horrific event for a long time. Story 91. Not having to be entertained all the time. The first thing my almost 6-year-old granddaughter asks for when we get in the car is my phone to watch YouTube Kids. She does not get it until we drive a while and she looks out the window and tells me what she sees. We talk about it, then she gets the phone and sometimes she forgets she wanted it. Story 92. Renting video games and movies from the local video store. Story 93. I used to date a lot during my teenage years. Many of us did. Story 94. Not having the internet or cell phones meant you had to develop many relationships. People were so much happier. I wish younger people could experience that. Story 95. Waiting for a song or video you like to come on the radio or on television. Figuring out the song lyrics yourself. Story 96. Lying around in a living room with friends, without phones, encouraged spontaneity. We would end up doing something weird to avoid boredom, which was creative. Story 97. University campuses were places where students met and formed bonds. Incidental meetings, shared information, and everyday human interactions created connections. Now everything is fractured across time and space. People no longer ask each other questions or have shared experiences. In online classes, students do not hang out together before or after. Story 98. Privacy is the ability to act foolishly in public without worrying that it will be online the next day. Story 99. Cheap concerts, privacy, a real childhood, and more. Story 100. I miss the times when the internet was not so corporate, when it was mostly random people's web pages. I also miss the freedom before September 11th, 2001. Story 101. You go outside until the streetlights come on, taking your sweet time to get home, only to find your parents watching television, relaxed. Story 102. I was walking around Blockbuster on a Friday night, looking for a good movie to watch. Story 103. Being present with the people physically around you is important. You now have to go high into the mountains to lose cellular service, and everyone still has their phones out taking pictures. I'm guilty of it too, but the connections I had as a child, as a teenager, and into my 20s when service was not as good in rural areas, felt stronger and more real. Story 104. Honestly, very little. The present is difficult and the past had its own problems. Cooler weather for much of the world, how about that? At my latitude, we used to be wary of school closing snowstorms in October or April. They were rare, but they happened. Nowadays, winter lasts from the end of December to the end of February, and snow no longer falls or accumulates like it used to. Story 105. I spent the whole day biking 15 miles to a friend's house, made a single call to my mother when I arrived, and returned home for dinner without any worries. Story 106. Drive-in movies. Large families were common. Many households once had 4 children or more, and there was something joyous about that. Now, it is impossible for most people because housing is so expensive. I worry that some people will never own a home. That is so messed up. I do not mean they will live in a New York City rent-controlled apartment for 50 years, still paying less than $800 a month with a fabulous, interesting city right outside. I mean they will spend their lives in less than 600 square feet, with rent increasing every year, never having a backyard or a garage where their children can form a garage band. Feeling safe in the neighborhood, so safe that children can ride bikes with friends and no one worries. Everyone has a Ring camera now, waiting for their catalytic converter to be stolen or for some smash and grab robbery. Story 107. Physical media was a huge hassle, but opening the case and reading the liner notes was a big part of my love for music. Story 108. Insects and birds. Deep snow in winter. Green forests full of wildlife. Clean air and water. Oceans free of plastic. You could smell the ocean 10 miles away. Affordable housing and higher education. Political statesmanship. Story 109, Optimism about the future. A world without smartphones or the internet. Story 110, I miss being able to disconnect. I became indispensable at my job, and when I am on vacation, I still receive the occasional call or text. I miss having my phone tied to the house, so I am completely unreachable. Story 111, Media and Typing Class. I remember being super excited to finish my typing course so I could play Oregon Trail and that three-dimensional pillbug game. Story 112, The early 2000s internet was a wondrous place. People on forums were often friendly and enthusiastic about the same topics, and I made lifelong friends there. I met many of them on trips around the world. Now people online are cynical and mean-spirited. Story 113. Imagine a childhood without screens, cameras, or the freedom to go out and explore the world unsupervised. Their lives will be more documented than those of previous generations, but my children may not have adventures to share with their own children someday. No shenanigans, no wild tales of mischief, no fond memories to reflect on in old age beyond which game was popular at the time. Story 114. I remember the excitement of going to Blockbuster on a Friday night and spending hours picking out movies and games for the weekend. Story 115. There was a time when live television show premieres on basic cable were actual social events that everyone talked about the next day. The closest thing in recent years was probably Game of Thrones, but that required the home box office network. Remember how big Survivor was when it premiered? Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Shows like Mobile Army Surgical Hospital and Seinfeld had finales that were so much fun. Story 116. I miss when movies had interesting plot lines, video games were fun and unique, and music was original and showcased real talent. Entertainment has become polished, corporate, cookie-cutter, unimaginative, and solely profit-driven, too safe to be interesting. I miss art and creativity. It was better when creative people sat together, figuring out how to use their talent to say something interesting or important. Story 117, Shame. People would do stupid things, quit a job, and not say anything in public for a long time. Those days are dead. Story 118. Small working-class cities once had thriving downtowns. The town I grew up in and many of the surrounding towns had busy centers with dozens of locally owned stores, restaurants, a deli, a few bars, a bank, a small movie theater, and many other amenities. There was even a free trolley that ran from one end of downtown to the other. Then Walmart came. Story 119. Children used to go outside to play while adults casually supervised them, and no one thought it was suspicious. Now, if a child is outside unsupervised, someone will call the police. If they do not and you say hello to a child, people assume you are a predator. Story 120, Autonomy. Affordable housing, 24-hour restaurants and shops, receiving what you pay for in terms of quality food and service, earning less than $600,000 a year, and being able to obtain a mortgage loan without cosigners. It is a long list, so I will stop here. Story 121. Being social and interacting without technology. The jukebox and the music videos that used to be on television. Penny candy that actually cost 1 penny. Church back then was church without the modern changes. Being clothed while still feeling attractive. Birthday parties that consisted of a cake, ice cream, hot dogs, and chips. Not the costly, overly elaborate events they call kids' parties now. Being given $1 or $2, which was a lot to us because we were grateful and understood that they did not have to give it to us, but did because they wanted to, not because we felt entitled. Eating what was put in front of me, whether I liked it or not, because as a kid I paid no bills and could not make demands. Story 122. Freedom, responsibility, and lack of privacy. Today there is location tracking, stranger danger, and all sorts of people who would have an issue with a group of kids wandering around. Today's children have little freedom. Everything is on camera. My friend sent her 10-year-old to get a newspaper from the gas station 1 block away before school. Someone called Child Protective Services on her for him being alone outside at 6:30 in the morning. Strangers had to go through her entire house. Everything is structured for them. It is unfortunate. They do not know what they are missing. Responsibility. What are today's kids responsible for? They are missing out on learning the benefits of responsibility. For homework, Teachers email parents about assignments. For grades, parents simply check the parent portal. For self-care, babysitters, play dates, sports teams, and helicopter parents handle their every need. For money, most transactions are digital and do not feel real. Lack of privacy. Children are tracked and recorded every day. Some cannot even be at home alone without cameras watching. Parents can go through their phones and read their text messages. They share too much information online and often do not understand the consequences. It is sad. I genuinely feel sorry for this and future generations. Everything is recorded, and humanity and the planet are dying. Story 123. The amount of money we used to bring on a night out has more than doubled this century. I will not mention the 1990s or the 1980s. Story 124. I wish the world had fewer people in it. There is so much traffic and so many crowds now. Story 125. I remember being a child and hanging out with my friends all night on the street. No smartphones, no alcohol or drugs, just plain childhood fun. I did not feel scared or that there was danger anywhere. I have not felt happiness in over 20 years, so those may have been the last moments. Story 126. I just met the cutoff here, 36. Hanging out with friends, we all sat around and talked. The only time you got your phone was if you actually needed to contact someone. Smartphones were just starting to hit the shelves the year we graduated, when the iPhone came out, but no one was glued to them even if they had one. I'll always miss that. Story 127. We used to ride our bikes for hours, play in the woods, build tree forts and catch frogs. We had spending money for drinks and a pizza roll and no cell phones. It seems like kids get hassled for being out on their own anymore, and parents can even get in trouble for allowing it. I would not consider allowing my children into most wooded areas alone now, given how many drug users camp in the ones I grew up around. Story 128. No internet, no cell phones, and a less invasive surveillance state. I used to sneak out of my house at night when I was a teenager. Those were some of the most fun times of my life. There is no way I would get away with that these days because of Ring cameras and similar devices. Story 129. The thrill of renting a movie with your parents, picking out a snack, and then everyone watching it together with no phones and no interruptions. Story 130. We went outside for the entire day, coming home only when the streetlights came on and staying within yelling distance of at least one parent. Story 131. There is freedom in not being accessible all the time and in rejecting the expectation to be. Cell phones are great for many things, but the expectation that I am always available through multiple communication channels is exhausting. I now treat my cell phone as I would a home phone and answer only when it's convenient for me. I refuse to put my work email on my phone and check my personal email only at the start and end of the day. Story 132. I miss going on vacation without every tourist spot being overrun by people. The holidays my parents took us on when we were kids in the late 1980s and early 1990s seemed to have a better balance between visitor numbers and capacity. Visitors were also more respectful and considerate of the surroundings and of sharing space with others. I sound like an old man who just wants peace and quiet now. Story 133. The two biggest things I miss are the limitations of physical media and the internet being a place you went on a computer instead of the ubiquitous entity it is today. I do not necessarily decry that it is different now. I understand the advantages, but I do miss it. With most media being accessed from the cloud now, the experience is cheaper and there is less pressure to make compelling art. Before streaming, if you wanted to watch a movie, you either had to catch it when it came on television, set your video cassette recorder to record it, go to a movie theater, or buy, rent, or borrow a physical videotape. That required an investment of time, planning ahead, and usually a little money. If you rented a new release movie from Blockbuster, you were going to be invested in watching the whole thing because you had spent $7 in 1996 to see it. Now, if you do not like a movie 20 minutes in, you back out and flip to something else. That is convenient, but it contributes to shorter attention spans. The impact on music is even greater. Music used to be something you physically held in your hand. Liner notes, album cover artwork, lyric sheets, fan club ads, and so on were part of the music experience. Instead of paying $12.99 per month for Apple Music and having instant access to a worldwide catalog of music, You had to pay anywhere from $14 to $25 for a new record or compact disc, or $10 to $18 for a new cassette. That not only encouraged bands and artists to try to make more compelling music, they still failed more often than not back then, but it made you give each album your full attention. I love streaming music. I use it to preview albums before I decide if I want a physical copy, but I miss when going to Sam Goody for your entertainment, Tower Records, Best Buy, or the local record store to get the latest release and discover new stuff was a thing. As for the internet being a place you accessed via a computer, it is less about disliking the ability to access information from anywhere and more about never being able to truly unplug from the world without going to greater lengths than I used to. Story 134. We used to play outside, disappearing in the morning, returning for lunch, and then going out again until dinner or dusk. Our parents simply sent us on our way. Story 135. Lying in bed Sunday morning, reading the Sunday edition of a major United States newspaper, especially the New York Times. Story 136. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, we could travel virtually anywhere by hitchhiking with no problems. Story 137. You used to be able to have debates about factual things, who was in what movie, weird trivia, and so on. Now everyone has Wikipedia in their pocket. Story 138. People felt safe enough to leave their doors unlocked and for children to walk to the park or the mall alone or with friends. Story 139. Kissing my sweetie at the airport gate right before one of us boards. Story 140. We used to grumble about Ticketmaster fees, but it wasn't nearly as bad as it is now. The early 2000s were the last time I was able to afford floor seats at Madison Square Garden. Before the internet, you had to call to buy tickets or go to a music store like Tower Records. There were scalpers back then, too, but we didn't have to deal with bots buying up all the good seats. Story 141. We climbed everything. Sheds, roofs, trees, and tall forts that led to flying foxes. We climbed piles of rocks and dirt at neighborhood house construction sites. I'm not sure whether parents were careless or simply unaware. Story 142. Life was better when everything was more analog. Maybe because I was younger, my attention span was better and my stress levels were lower. I miss not having to be available on chat and phone 24/7. People now get very upset if I do not get back to them quickly. Back then you would call back when it suited you, and there were never any questions about it. Story 143. True boredom. I never realized what a privilege it is for people, especially children. Story 144. Going to a theater for a couple of hours to watch a movie like Pulp Fiction, Seven, or The Blair Witch Project was a shared experience. There was no way to watch trailers in advance, no option to stream the film at home, and no smartphones to distract you from the movie. Story 145. We were able to go out and do what we wanted until the streetlights came on, with no parental supervision. We walked to and from school with friends and took whatever detour looked interesting on the way. Story 146. A trustworthy internet was pretty cool. No cookies, banners, or mailing lists. The internet is so tiresome. Story 147. A lot of people think I'm crazy, but I like waiting in line to see a movie. Nowadays, every movie theater has reserved seating, and few films draw crowds for opening night. Some of my best memories are of waiting an hour or two to get the best seat for a blockbuster. You would bring snacks, a book, and a card game or two, sit with friends and wait. Story 148. A proper civics and social studies class teaches about the three equal branches of government, constitutional rights, and the belief that the system functions properly. I am pretty sure that is gone forever. Story 149. High-quality toys that never broke and annoyed our parents so much that they waited until we were not home to get rid of them, then told us the toys were lost. Story 150. I was talking with a friend the other day about bar talk. It's the conversation style that meanders as topics, jokes, and thoughts come up without any real clarification. People accepted a sports stat or hobby fact as true and moved on. No one had a smartphone, so no one could shut down guesses and speculation with the actual facts. We all sat around and traded tall tales. I stopped hanging out with others because conversations became boring. Smartphones and social media ruined the random, often surprising adventure of just hanging out. Story 151. Cars, the land of endless pickups and sport utility vehicles, are all extremely bland. Story 152. I was telling my kids about the Trix rabbit and how the children never let him eat the cereal. He would create elaborate schemes and costumes to try to sneak some delicious fruit-flavored cereal. And every time someone would say, "Silly rabbit, Trix are for kids," I feel like the golden age of commercials is gone, which is a strange thing to be nostalgic for. Another example is the odd culture around the answering machine and voicemail. People made fun recordings, used call screening, and if you called someone you knew was home, you might leave a message saying, "Pick up," until they answered. The lack of caller identification and those behaviors are gone now. Story 153. Unsettled debates about trivia. Basically life before Google. These days it's harder to convince people that Steve Buscemi was a background actor in Schindler's List and then wait for a mutual acquaintance to repeat the fact later. Story 154. I am 54. I had a childhood completely devoid of the internet, social media, and cell phones. Story 155. Old school Pokemon. Hear me out. When Pokemon came out, you could battle and trade with friends, but you had to be about 2 feet away. Many people saw that as a downside and preferred being able to play with friends online from anywhere at any time. Because of those limitations, people gathered. Game stores held events and set up Pokemon gyms. Perhaps the biggest innovation of Pokemon was that it encouraged real-life socialization. Now you can probably get more than half the Pokemon just by using the random trade feature repeatedly. Feels lifeless. Story 156. Playing with my friends before the internet and cell phones, we were off the grid and just enjoyed being together. We headed home when the street lamps came on. Story 157. Children used to go outside and play for hours without worrying about something bad happening. Now there is fear of sex trafficking and kidnapping, and children cannot go outside and play with friends anymore. Story 158. We had to put in effort to look something up. Whenever I heard something fascinating about history, I would go to the library, consult several encyclopedias, and read until I found what I wanted to know. Now we just search for it online. When making plans with someone, we would call, set a time and a place, and make sure we arrived on time. When going on a trip, we planned our routes on a map, looked up the places we wanted to visit, and, when we arrived, enjoyed seeing what we had come for. Story 159. Enjoying everything the world has to offer in 3 dimensions, not through a screen. Story 160. A life unshackled from a cell phone and the ability to do your job without interruptions. Story 161. Palm operating system and hot synchronization. It was simply the idea that you could type responses to emails on your phone and send them when you next reached a computer. Generally, that happened once a day. Also, email digests that collected a day's worth of information and presented it to you without requiring an internet connection. Story 162. Some things felt more special because they were rarer. Pictures, birthday cards, videos, and television. Before social media, visiting a friend made more sense. A downside was that when a friend moved, keeping in touch was practically impossible as a child. Story 163. Catching up with friends by phone at planned times, rather than randomly messaging throughout the week, feels more meaningful. As I get older, casual chats feel increasingly hollow. Story 164. No streaming or on-demand television. You just flipped through the channels until you found the best option, instead of consuming whatever the algorithm fed you. No social media on your phone. I was in college in the late 2000s. Some people would bring a digital camera and upload pictures to Facebook later, but it was not a constant stream of what you were doing or what others were doing. Music. I miss waiting for my favorite new song to debut on music television or to be played on Total Request Live, and going to the store to buy a new album. Concerts. Everyone was much more into the music and the atmosphere rather than going so they could post on TikTok and Instagram that they were at the show. Story 165. Freedom to play outside with other children without adult supervision and to resolve conflicts on their own. Story 166. Analog dating versus online dating. You can only date people you actually see in real life. Fewer choices but no fake profiles. Story 167. attending events and actually being able to see, because not everyone has their phone out recording what is happening instead of enjoying the moment. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.